Jack Dorsey just made a bold move that could trigger a huge wave of demand in November and onboard millions more to Bitcoin. He's transforming Square into a powerhouse that could change how we spend money forever. His stunning redemption arc from Twitter censorship scandals to becoming a champion of open source Bitcoin tech and tools for human rights activists is really something to behold. Decentralizing mining, simplifying self-custody, and now he's about to catapult Bitcoin payments to the next level. But he's not alone. Huge corporations are joining Bitcoin and announcing plans to further accept Bitcoin and push it from a store of value to the dominant medium of exchange. Plus, tonight, to kick things off, we've got an amazing guest to break down the recent price pump. Market analyst Joe Consorti, who's here to reveal why Bitcoin's recent all-time high, just shy of 126,000 US, is only the beginning, and why this fall is about to blow away your expectations. Don't go anywhere. You can't afford to miss this one. I am Nathan with the BTC Sessions, and this is your weekly session. All right, let me go ahead and pull in my wonderful co-host, Gary Mahmood, and special guest, Joe Consorti. Joe, how are you doing today, sir?
Doing fantastic. Thank you so much for having me on, gentlemen. Really excited to talk about the market today.
Wonderful. We love to hear it. If you've got anything to share too as well, hit that screen share button and I'll pull it up here on screen. I just don't see it in the sidelines beside me. But so Joe, we've recently had the all-time high. I know that gold has been absolutely ripping. Break down for me what's going on here. What are you seeing in the price movement? What are you seeing in the charts?
Absolutely. So essentially, the conditions of today line up very closely with what happened last summer, last Q4. So if you'll remember, if you'll rewind the clock back 365 days, Bitcoin had been consolidating for more than half the year. Everybody was sort of in despair. Obviously, Bitcoin is one asset in a universe of other ones. And it got pretty boring and demoralizing after Bitcoin had spent the entire summer consolidating and kind of trending down while other assets ripped higher. The reality is that for Bitcoin, summer tends to be a pretty slow period of time. But, you know, thank goodness that moving into September, October, November, and December, those tend to be Bitcoin's best performing months. Actually, as soon as we moved into October, Bitcoin had already more than doubled, not more than doubled. It had already outperformed the entire month of September. And so honestly, that's kind of the world that we're in now. And when I talk about the lining up of the macro conditions, a few things that I'm speaking to. Number one is that we move into a period of monetary easing. Last September lines up with exactly what happened this September in that the Fed began lowering interest rates once again. A couple of weeks after that happened, that was one of the catalysts that allowed Bitcoin to skyrocket from its low of around $60,000, $58,000, all the way up to higher than $100,000 by year end. The second thing is that Bitcoin has established a great deal of strength in the area that it has been ranging. And I'll actually go ahead and pull up that chart in just 1 second. But it's established a great deal of strength in that range. And that's exactly what happened last summer, right? We spent well over half the year above 100K. And it wasn't until basically the day before October 1st that this actually all kicked off. So ultimately, Bitcoin is doing the exact same two things that it did last year, which is, you know, coming out of this really consolidation period where buyers had time to step in and take over from sellers, establishing a much higher cost basis for the overall market. And the second thing being the easing of monetary conditions. When credit conditions ease, when rates come down, investors move out on the risk curve into assets that are traditionally riskier, offer higher returns, offer higher sensitivity to the market. And Bitcoin has been a huge beneficiary of that in years past. So the exact same setup that Bitcoin had last summer that drove its bull run is the exact same setup that we're seeing today.
Interesting. Very cool. I'm curious kind of on that note then as well, too, with the kind of gold leading the charge as well. We've got the conditions setting up that we're going to see rates come down. It seems like Trump has been pushing for that. And Powell's also on his way out next spring or May, if I'm not mistaken, as well, too. I'm curious if the movement that we're seeing in gold is actually of any concern to you in the sense that it seems like it's ripped really fast and really hard, which to me also gives a little bit of a pause for alarm, like people are getting out of dollars quickly.
Very well said. This is actually a really good point that I wanted to bring up. JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley, and Deutsche Bank have now all said that gold and Bitcoin are part of the same trade. What does that mean? Obviously, gold is now up 25% in the last 40 days, 45 days. For reference, it's added about $4.5 trillion to its market cap, or about 1.8 times Bitcoin's market cap, which is insane, right? So in 45 days, it has added almost 2 entire Bitcoin market values to its own market value. which generally doesn't happen. Gold tends to be the first fire alarm, right? When something is wrong, either huge geopolitical risk, massive fears about dollar debasement, or other, general inflation concerns, general macroeconomy concerns, particularly revolving around the US dollar. The thing to note, though, is that now that these big shops are saying that gold and BTC are part of the same trade, that shouldn't be cause for concern for Bitcoiners. In fact, that should be something to celebrate and to look forward to. Historically, Bitcoin tends to lag gold by about 100 days. This is a relatively loose correlation, I will say. There have been periods of time where these two are totally uncorrelated. However, if you take a look at the beginning of this year, the dollar has been in a secular trend of decline, right? So the dollar has been weakening on a macro basis for the entire year up to this point. That's right around the time that gold began ripping. You could see in the white line on this chart right here, it did pretty well in 2024, but it went pretty vertical the moment the dollar started weakening. And so that's great news for BTC, right? You saw when you lag Bitcoin behind by 100 days, the exact same move occurred. Gold consolidated throughout the summer. It chopped around for about the exact same time, actually, that Bitcoin chopped around, and then it went vertical again. Two reasons that it kind of leads Bitcoin in this trade, or one big reason that it leads Bitcoin in this trade, is because it's much more widely dispersed, right? A $27 trillion asset, Bitcoin is a $2.5 trillion asset. And so obviously gold being much more highly liquid, it moves far faster. It sniffs out these moves in dollar debasement quicker than Bitcoin does. And the other component to consider is that Bitcoin does not trade with gold most of the time, right? It's traditionally more correlated to the risk on bucket. It's more correlated to the NASDAQ, to the S&P. However, in times where credit conditions are easing, in times where there's a lot of geopolitical tension, gold is kind of ripping for that reason. And it seems Bitcoin is on the precipice of ripping for that very reason too. And so, the reason I say this is because Morgan Stanley, JP Morgan, again, Deutsche Bank, all coming out and saying that Bitcoin is following a very similar path to gold. That leads me to believe, even more than this chart does, and even more than, the same conditions do, that we are on the precipice of some kind of rotation out of one asset and into the other. Because Bitcoin performs gold's functions better than gold does. I won't say this is something that's going to occur in the immediate term. Bitcoin may follow gold, it may not. This chart may prove to be completely frivolous, of an exercise. But these big banks in the United States and globally saying that they're part of the same trade leads me to believe that at the margin, even a small percentage of rotation out of gold into Bitcoin, which is a riskier asset. And as you get later in the cycle, investors move from more certain assets, lesser correlated assets like gold, more risk off assets, into risk on assets. They take more risk. They move out on the risk curve. And so all of these factors together lead me to believe that Bitcoin may be on the cusp of following gold. The last thing I'll say here is that JP Morgan put out a report where they said that Bitcoin's volatility adjusted fair value relative to gold is $165,000, meaning that the amount of risk capital to invest in gold is much higher than is needed to invest in Bitcoin. And so ultimately, a prudent portion of capital at these banks, at these institutions, at hedge funds, simply rotating into Bitcoin would have an astronomical impact, right? All of these reports together, all of these macro conditions together lead me to believe that Bitcoin, at least at the margin, might follow gold through Q4. And if it doesn't, then Bitcoin, I think, will do well in its own right, just given the macro setup that we're experiencing.
That's very interesting. I do want to know where you think it's going. I want to get your price predictions as well too, because that's always a lot of fun. But I want to ask you specifically on that note. So we often, people talk about basically Bitcoin just following tech stocks, just following the NASDAQ. They treat it like a tech stock. And we've been waiting for that moment to kind of become the store of value, the safe haven, the savings mechanism that we know it to be. I'm wondering, one, if this is basically the early hintings of that, and it's what it sounds like to me. But additionally, I also hear a lot of people talking about basically the AI tech bubble, right? We have the AI bubble right now. Now, if we do or don't, I'm not 100% sure. And when or where that would pop, I have no clue. But this would lead me to believe that if we saw a major correction in like the S&P or the NASDAQ, that Bitcoin might not actually follow the crash down. If it's being viewed more as the safe haven and the debasement play, it might not be susceptible to any sort of, we'll say, hiccups that we see in the general market.
Very well said. I would disagree with that last point. Your reasoning makes a lot of sense, but Bitcoin is, still tightly correlated to the risk on bucket. So if there's a sell-off in the S&P, there's definitely going to be a sell-off in Bitcoin. It'll be more acutely impacted than the S&P 500. But what I will say is that I don't believe we're in as much of a bubble as people think we are. If you take a look at earnings relative to the price, and you trace it back all the way to 2000 as a good analog, right, during the dot-com bubble, earnings are actually much closer to stock prices than they were during the bubble, right? So
Really?
the bubble is quite inflated, but it's not nearly as inflated as it was back in 2000 when basically everybody with a pulse was making a dot-com business and bringing it public. So that's what I will say. The bubble isn't nearly as inflated as people believe it to be. And the second thing is that, AI has a great deal of utility. There certainly are companies out there that are completely overinflated, but we are living through kind of a secular shift where the AI trade, I don't think, is going anywhere. It may slow down at the margin. Obviously, there's going to be some cyclicality there, but there's a structural change in the global economy, in technology, and the way that people operate, and AI is a huge component of that. So I don't think it's going away anytime soon. Some of the hot air may be let out of the bubble, but I don't think the hot air will be let out of the bubble in a time where the Fed is cutting interest rates, right? The Fed is cutting interest rates into an economy that is already relatively robust, right? Price inflation is sticky around 3%. And so they're bringing down the cost of capital in an environment where credit spreads are already very narrow. It's easy to get a loan as a business. It's easy to get a loan as a consumer. And so it's only going to reinflate kind of conditions more. It's only going to reinflate that bubble more, if you will. And so as a near-term risk, I don't view that as much of a crisis. You see the Fed's Stephen Moran going out and saying that he believes the neutral rate is 0.5%. For reference, we're around 4%, 4.25% right now. So that's extremely low. That's very low relative to where we are currently. And so the path of least resistance for the Fed's neutral rate is much lower over the course of the next year. And so the path of least resistance for risk assets is much higher as credit conditions continue to loosen. So Bitcoin is still very tightly correlated to the NASDAQ, but that's not to say it's uncorrelated to the debasement trade, right? Bitcoin at the margin is at long last starting to be viewed as something that will appreciate very heavily during a period of dollar debasement, secular dollar debasement. And so, Bitcoin is morphing into an asset that is tightly correlated to the risk on bucket to being something that's more uncorrelated, right? It does very well when gold does well, but it also does well when the risk bucket does well. And that's ultimately what you want to look for. Bitcoin's monetary properties allow it to be the least correlated asset ever. It's something you want to own all the time, just like gold is something you want to own all the time. And Bitcoin is slowly but surely getting there. I don't think from a behavioral perspective, we're there quite yet. But that remains to be seen. Kind of TLDR on that. I don't think, if the proverbial AI bubble were to pop and the S&P were to go, I think Bitcoin would go right along with it. But I don't think we're set up for that just yet.
Excellent. Interesting. Gary, before I jump back in, there was anything you wanted to ask Joe quick?
Joe, you're really smart.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. I really appreciate your commentary there. Joe, I did want to ask kind of two things. I'll start with the comment from, I believe it was Miran. The 0.5 is the neutral rate. That sounds to me like a little bit of soft-handed forward guidance. Do you think he's basically setting the table for we're going to bring this down a lot more than you think next year?
He is, yeah. We've seen basically post 2008, the Fed loves to forecast to the market exactly where we're going in the form of forward guidance, right? Either explicitly saying, hey, this is where we want to bring rates by via things like the Fed meeting notes, via things like the Fed's dot plot. That's very explicit where we're taking rates, and then also saying things like this during press conferences, during speaking tours. So yeah, no, I think rates are going much lower. I don't think they're going to 0.5%. I think that would be insane, particularly with inflation at 3%. But you also have to consider the U.S. government's fiscal situation, right? Where we are now as a country, we have $37 trillion in debt. We have a 7% federal deficit as a percentage of GDP. We have $1.13 trillion worth of interest expense every year. And so in order to not, we have to continue levering the system up in order to handle that. If we have high policy rates and that drags other rates higher, that drags the U.S. Treasury market higher, then rates are at a level where it's untenable for the U.S. government to fund itself, right? So rates need to come down. Inflation has to be less of a concern. Otherwise, we get a prolonged recession. And at every turn, the Fed has proven that it would rather get overinflated asset prices than a prolonged recession. They've proven that time and again in 2008, in 2020, in 2019 even, and in 2023, that they would rather re-lever the system, save the banks, create more money out of thin air, lend it into existence, and bring rates down than worry about inflation, right? So that's kind of where I think we are headed. But I do not believe that rates are headed to 0.5%. I think they're headed lower. But I think 0.5% is a bit of a stretch. But we'll see. Anything can happen.
Anything could happen. It'd be crazy if it actually went that far. I do want to know exactly where you think this is going, if you have any thoughts on that. But even before we tease that apart, the last thing I did want to check in on is you talked about how we had this long consolidation period. And I agree, people were getting really bored of 100K, which even me saying that is just absolutely astounding that Bitcoin's ever 100,000 and everyone's bored and no one's necessarily paying attention. We're starting to move again, but we spent so much time there at that base. I'm wondering if there's anything you've seen maybe in on-chain analytics that would support that we are at a very healthy foundation to continue upward from here.
Yeah, very well said. The main thing that I've been looking at is long-term holder supply versus short-term holder supply. So long-term holder supply, anybody who's held for 155 days or more, generally speaking, they distribute into strength. So they sell to new market entrants when Bitcoin's price is going up. And then that starts to steady out once Bitcoin has found a new base to jump from. A couple of weeks ago, I wrote a report on this that long-term holder supply selling was coming to an end. It was exhausting. The rate at which they were selling coins was slowing down more and more. And so now that that's exhausted, we've kind of built out a really firm base for Bitcoin to leap from and for them to begin distributing once more. We're seeing a lot of overhead resistance when it comes to this current level. 120,000 seems to be an area that a lot of people piled in. And you could tell you could tell based on short-term holder cost basis, right? So folks who've been in the market for less than 155 days where they purchase Bitcoin, that has been very elevated. That's very high. But just zooming out and looking at the supply dynamics, the fact that long-term holders have exhausted their selling for the time being, that tells me that we're poised to rip much higher. And then from there, we'll see more long-term holder distribution. But really, from an on-chain perspective, the market is primed. From a supply dynamics perspective, from a valuations perspective, you look at where Bitcoin is relative to the short-term holder cost basis, and it is pretty low, right? So there's a lot more room for expansion in Bitcoin's price relative to the average purchase price of short-term holders. And considering the fact that long-term holder supply has been distributed, over the summer, and it seems to have exhausted for now.
That's amazing. Fantastic. All right, Joe, last question then. In your opinion, just your opinion, fun numbers thrown out there, where are we going for the rest of the year right now? Where do you see kind of Q4 ending up here? How's November? How's December? How's the rest of October going to look?
Yeah, of course. So I like to consider these things in terms of a balance of risk rather than saying an absolute target. Being probabilistic rather than predictive, that's a really good way to make money and position yourself. And it's also very good for your mental health, right? Not just saying, this is my target for the end of the year. So thinking in terms of probabilities, seeing where the U.S. economy is right now, seeing where the market has the path of rate cuts priced into the end of the year, and taking all of that into consideration, seeing what gold has done, I believe that there's probably a 60% probability that Bitcoin winds up at $135,000 or higher before the end of the year. An even lower probability, say 20% or 30%, that we wind up at 150,000 or higher. And there is a pretty low probability, I'd say 10 or 20%, that Bitcoin winds up lower than it is now. Just looking at the totality of macro factors, whether it's the direction of rates, whether it's Bitcoin dynamics, whether it's the amount of time that we spent in this range, or whether it's the broader risk sentiment in the market, considering both of those factors, I just don't think there's a world where Bitcoin ends up lower than it is currently by the end of the year. Now, a lot of things can change. The economy can suddenly take a turn once the BLS is up and running again and they are reporting government data as it comes in. It may be the case that the economy is actually in rougher shape than was expected, and the Fed is forced to cut aggressively. You see a flight to safety. Everybody sells whatever they can for cash, and a recession ensues before the end of the year. I don't think that's going to happen, but there's always that scenario. And in scenarios like that, all correlations go to 1 and Bitcoin sells off along with everything else. There's also the scenario where the economy proves to be way too hot, way too quickly. So with inflation at 3%, even just the Fed's 125 basis point cut that they've done now, that proves to loosen credit conditions too much. Inflation proves to be much higher than expected. And the Fed reins in their path for interest rate cuts over the foreseeable future. And that draws capital back out of risk assets as well. Both of those are risks. I assign a very low probability to those. The probability that I assign the most weight to is Bitcoin and other risk assets moving much higher than they are now into the end of the year, for all the reasons that I outlined.
That's absolutely beautiful. Joe, thank you so much for stopping by and giving us the breakdown on what's happening right now. I really appreciate your insight. You are phenomenal in this space. Tell everybody quickly before we jump for break, where can they follow you? Where can you find you? All that fun stuff.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. If you want to find more of my work, you can go to Joe Consorti on X. And if you want to check out my business, you can go to joinhorizon.com. Horizon lets you buy Bitcoin using your home equity without new debt, monthly payments, interest charges, or term limits.
Absolutely beautiful. Guys, when we get back from the break, we're going to jump into all the businesses that are onboarding Bitcoin as payments, major breaking announcements there, as well as we're going to give away some stats quick. So stick around. We'll be right back with you.
Looking for a simple and secure way to manage your Bitcoin on mobile? AQUA Wallet has you covered. It's user-friendly and puts you in full control of your Bitcoin with secure self-custody. AQUA also supports Lightning and Liquid Network, making fast, cheap Bitcoin payments and asset transfers easier than ever. Plus, it even supports stablecoins, giving you ultimate flexibility. Built on open source code, AQUA is transparent, trustworthy, and perfect for beginner and pros alike. Ready to upgrade your Bitcoin experience? Click the link in the show notes or scan the QR code on the screen now to download AQUA Wallet today. Securing your Bitcoin doesn't have to be complicated or invasive. With NUNCHUK's HONEYBADGER plan, you get state-of-the-art multisig with built-in inheritance planning and no KYC required. NUNCHUK is trusted by users to secure billions of dollars in Bitcoin. The HONEYBADGER plan offers 204 assisted multisig, guiding you step-by-step on mobile or desktop. It works seamlessly with hardware wallets like TapSigner, ColdCard, Jade, and plenty of others, so you're always in control. Plus, with non-KYC inheritance planning, you can ensure your Bitcoin goes to your loved ones. No private info needed. Take control of your Bitcoin today. Click the link in the show notes or scan the QR code on the screen to check out the HONEYBADGER plan. CoinKite has been in the game for years, creating hands down the best and most secure hardware when it comes to securing your Bitcoin. The ColdCard Q is an absolute powerhouse and my daily driver, and it's ideal for newcomers and advanced users alike. The TapSigner gives you a low-cost, user-friendly option for those just getting started or for convenience when traveling. You can head to coinkite.com and use code BTC Sessions for discounts, or simply scan the QR code on the screen to get started right away.
All right, we are back into it, and we are going to give away some stats right here in a second from Bitcoin Well. Of course, Bitcoin Well, you can collect points anytime that you prefer a friend, stack some sats, DCA, all that fun stuff. These are Ben's points we'll be giving away. But first and foremost, too, Gary, I just love that Joe came and stopped by. We just kind of like asked him last minute. Wonderful dude. Really appreciate him coming and sharing his insight with us.
It's like he's done this before. He was really good. I just sat back and let him go.
It was absolutely beautiful. We got lots to talk about in terms of merchant adoption for Bitcoin, what Jack Dorsey has just announced and what it means for everybody. But first, let's give away some stats nice and quick here. So, playing the Bitcoin Wishing Well, redeeming Ben's 500 points. First one to snag those sats, scan them, get those lightning wallets ready, scan that QR code. If you do get it, let us know in the comments down below. 454 stats given away. And also, guys, if you're having fun, you're hanging out, give us a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I know we got a lot of newcomers. It is greatly appreciated. So, jumping over here, connecting the ecosystem with Square has been the dream since we launched Bitcoin and Cash App in 2018. Starting today, all merchants can now seamlessly stack Bitcoin behind the scenes from their daily sales. Bitcoin payments acceptance will be live for everyone starting November 10th. What is going on? Let's let that play out for a second here. So Square, I think I saw 57 million transactions, I think, last year. They've got 4 million users using the Square point of sale terminal, all of which starting November 10th will have the ability to turn that on and simply receive Bitcoin payments. We also saw, there's another note here as well too, 4 million, that they're doing it at no cost. So any merchant, and there's tons of them. I see them at restaurants, I see them at cafes, I see them all over the place. Even like yoga instructors carrying around the little Square adapter with them as well too. Anyone accepting Square for payments, will be able to easily accept Bitcoin. And this is fantastic for us. For the guys that are going out there trying to onboard people in your community, a lot of them are already using this POS system. They're already familiar with it. There's no hurdle, there's no barrier. So all those attempts to get the local grocer to accept Bitcoin, you actually have a reasonable chance now. They just got to go, hey, go into your settings. It costs you nothing else. You can turn this on and start accepting Bitcoin payments from me and others right away. I have some more thoughts on it, but Gary, your immediate kind of response.
Well, I mean, when I first saw it, my immediate instinctive response is like, well, why don't they just accept Bitcoin like anybody else? Why do they need to do this? But you're right. You know, if you're running a business, you don't have time to take down your whole setup arrangement, how you're bookkeeping, how you're paying taxes. If you're already doing it through Square and somebody says, hey, just click a button, you can take Bitcoin. Why not? You know, ideally in our future world, yes, we'll accept Bitcoin directly, but this guy's trying to build something. I'm sitting here in my house on my ass. He's making an improvement. Let him do it.
I absolutely, yeah, I agree, and I love it. And I'm happy that he's doing it too, because again, it's that barrier to entry. And you know, Gary and you and I have talked a lot about with like more educating people on using Bitcoin. That there's only so much you can kind of do from like a position like lecturing, right? I can only tell you about it so much. At some point in time, if you want to learn how to work on like a car engine, we're gonna have to grab a wrench. We're gonna have to get under the hood and start playing with it a little bit. Yeah. And what I'm hopeful is that for a lot of people, this will be able to be their first time actually using Bitcoin in any sort of sense. For a lot of merchants, it'll be the first time, so they're gonna see that that's less in fees. There's no credit card bills or payments associated with it. It's final settlement. It's super quick. And if they don't necessarily convert all of it to fiat, they'll start paying attention to the price appreciation and maybe start considering it as a savings mechanism as well. Again, I'm very optimistic that what Jack's doing here, enabling Bitcoin payments for 4 million merchants just immediately and quickly, will help bring about that greater adoption. Anything else that you want to add on that? Any other thoughts?
I think you're spot on. People get in different ways for different reasons. And if this is a way that allows people to get in where they might not have considered it before, great, wonderful. I'm happy about it.
Yeah. And even just like a small proportion, like even think of like, I don't know, if 1%, that's still what, 40,000 people then using Bitcoin that weren't before because Jack went out here and did this, right? Yeah. It's greatly appreciated. And even just wanted to note on too, he is doing a ton in the space. I mean, we don't necessarily have to forgive him for all the shortcomings of the Twitter days and all the terrible censorship and shit that was going on then. I will never to this day, by the way, forget that the conversation, I think it was Joe Rogan and like, I forget her name, JJ, the lawyer that he had to take with him, and Tim Pool. And man, that was just it seemed like a public struggle session. That man seemed like he had lost control of the company to the board long ago.
He looked like he was being held hostage. Just what do I need to say to protect my family right now?
No, 100%. And he's doing good work now. So I appreciate Square. We're getting the Bitcoin payments in there. They talked about it at the Bitcoin conference. I believe they're testing it out there as well too. So glad to see November 10th. That's finally launching. He's also got the proto miner that he's been working on as well too. I don't know if they're actually out in the wild yet or if they're doing pre-sales, but seeing another manufacturer in the United States for decentralizing mining hardware, I think is fantastic. And the modular design in terms of upkeep, I think it's a great idea. I love to see another product out there, another option for people to use. Plus, he's also got the BitKey. And then, Gary, seeing as how you and I, again, in the education space, I'm curious your thoughts on the BitKey. I see its purpose. I have my questions, but what's your take on it?
Well, you know, we were chatting about it before, and I thought you brought up the great point. Yeah, you don't get to actually see your recovery seed. It doesn't have the micromanagement tool. But, you know, with us in Bitcoin Mentor, we're very much of the philosophy of meeting people where they are. And, you know, if you've never even dipped your foot into Bitcoin and you say, listen, I want to get some, but I just want to leave it on the exchange, we're going to say, hey, that's better than not having it at all. At least you're going to protect your money from the money printer. And sure, go leave it on the exchange. But if you have it there for a month or so, like, hey, can we work on getting it off? And if getting it off means putting it on something like this because you don't feel as comfortable going to something like a cold card or any standard hot wallet or whatever, if this makes you feel good, go for it. It wouldn't be my personal choice only because I have, amazingly enough, a little more tech savvy than that. But I didn't get there overnight. If I was just getting started, I might have gone for something like this.
No, 100%. For someone who's really struggling, that doesn't have the tech skills, is really not confident in it, I see the purpose for this device. I see where it fits into the market, right? And I kind of view it too as like a good intermediary. Like don't leave it on, for the love of God, don't leave it on the exchange. Get a BitKey. That's great. And as you continue learning, again, the best security you have in Bitcoin is continue to advance your skills, btcsessions.ca/learn, and thank you. And continuing to learn more and more about, even just like from the tech side, like we love to focus on the econ, the price, but learn the tools, learn how it works under the hood if you haven't started to play around with it. So again, my issues are that it doesn't have a screen, which is one of the big ones for me. It's kind of a warm wallet in the sense, because you've got one key on their server and then one key on a hot phone on a mobile wallet as well too. And then additionally, you can't port it to anything else. But I understand where this fits in the market. There absolutely is a demographic for it. Like, the reason like not having your seed phrase is like, I get it, because how many people we saw, there's the gentleman who put his seed phrase into the malicious, terrible, only 1-star review of Sparrow, right?
Oh, God.
How many people out there don't yet understand what the seed phrase is and then are at risk of putting it somewhere because a app or a email or a letter, by the way, Ledger clients, Ledger customers are getting letters in the mail these days. They're putting it into the wrong place and losing everything. So I see the purpose. I think it's a wonderful intermediary, or for someone who really can't get their technical skills there. Beats a hot wallet just standard, and it definitely beats being on the exchange or using a custodian. So love the work that Jack is doing. He's also doing tons of stuff with human rights activists and building apps specifically for them.
And I got to say, it looks really pretty. So it's probably the prettiest wallet out there, I'll say.
I'll give the engineering and the design teams like, looks great. Really wish it had a screen so I knew what I was signing on it, but still looks great. Similarly, keeping with that theme as well too, we had Jack posting, and again, Jack, again, it's great, man. I'm not sure that I forgive you yet, but I really appreciate all the amazing work that you're doing. We need a de minimis tax exemption for everyday Bitcoin transactions. I could not agree more. And it's nice to see Senator Lummis. Again, nothing's really come from the Bitcoin bill yet. Maybe that's on the horizon. We'll see. But it's nice to see at least we have the sentiment behind it. Working on it. If this interests you, please tell your senators and House members. And to that point, I would agree, right? I think this is the big battle. More than the Bitcoin strategic reserve, any sort of tax exemption for using Bitcoin as money, I think is what's really, really important. We just got to get our foot in the door on this one. Gary?
Yeah, you're 100% right. You called it the Holy Grail. It's the Holy Grail. And you and I have talked about this for a long time. I think as long as we've known each other, you're talking about strategic reserve. What can the government do to help people adopt Bitcoin? Get the fuck out of the way. If you just get the fuck out of the way and not have to make it such an issue where people have to worry about paying taxes on a damn cup of coffee, then this will grow. It will grow huge. At least I think it will. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm not the smartest man in the world or even in the room right now between the two of us, but I genuinely believe it will grow massively organically if you just remove this major barrier to people. So get out of the way. Like you said, you do the de minimis. I'd rather it just be a complete withdrawal of all capital gains. I know Lummis has been talking about a de minimis exemption for a long time. At first, it was something like, well, for $3,000. Then it was like $1,000. Then $600. Like, all right, can we maybe get $50 at some point? Like, what are we doing here? But like you said, once you get your foot in the door, then it's like that old joke about prostitution. Like, would you do that? Would you have sex with this guy for $50? Like, no, but would you do it for $1 million? Well, yeah, okay. And then, sorry, I missed that. Would you for 50? Like, no, what do you think? I am a whore? Like, yeah, we've already established that. Now we're just negotiating over the price. So yeah, just get in the door. And you had that great idea. Like, don't peg it to the dollar, peg it to sats. Because if you say like, all right, it's a 500,000 sat exemption, well, that's going to be worth a whole lot more with each passing year. So if the politicians are dumb enough to just be like, oh, we'll peg it to sats if that's what you want, these Bitcoin idiots, great. Assume I'm an idiot, peg it to sats, have fun.
No, 100%. I think that would be the sneakiest way of getting it in there and having it self-adjusting over time. In the same way that what is it, like you can only carry like $10,000 flying. You have to report anything like over $10,000 to the IRS. Just get the Bitcoin de minimis amount. Don't worry about the amount, but just have it set in sats, and that will at least continue to grow in purchasing power over time without having to re-lobby or give them shit. So
100%. Now, Nate, question for you before, quick. What do you think the odds are if there being any de minimis exemption at all within the next year?
Next year? Oh, geez. Next year, I'm going to go 0. I don't think it happens in the next year.
Agreed.
5 to 10, I'm starting to question a little bit. I think at some point in time, even from just those damn Keynesians love to talk about money velocity as well too, right? If people are using Square and they're paying with Bitcoin, and that means that there's more tax implications, more transactions occurring. If Bitcoiners' purchasing power is continuing to grow, which means you have a wealthy base who is not spending their money because they're punished for doing so, right? Then they're going to have an incentive to be like, if we just let these guys go, there's going to be more money circulating around. There's going to be more transactions. We're going to get that boost. We're going to get that tax revenue. You know what I think about that. But I think it will come, even just from it may even be a situation in the same way that we had weed became legalized, essentially, was they just stopped enforcing it. I wouldn't be surprised to see them stop, they're not even attempt to enforce Bitcoin transactions for taxation under a certain threshold. And then at some point in time, they just codify it in law.
Fair point.
Beautiful, beautiful. So, but Square, the big announcement there, but what else is going on? Who else is looking at accepting Bitcoin payments? Well, If you recognize this guy, we just had him on the show. Lovely gentleman right there.
He looks very familiar.
He looks very familiar. Open Door will soon accept Bitcoin for home purchases. The 55.1 trillion US housing market just took its first step towards Bitcoin denominated settlement. And I did want to touch on this briefly because I do think that homes are going to be one of the first unit of account moments for Bitcoin as well. We've heard Jeff Booth talk about this, how his home has gone down in price because he's thinking of it in a Bitcoin mindset. I think that a lot of people will. That because they're kind of, Bitcoin is a retirement tool, your home is often, unfortunately, your retirement savings as well too, that they kind of get lumped together, and that's where you see the biggest opportunity cost. And so we had Grant Cardone on the podcast just the other week too, and he made the comment he doesn't actually think anybody would ever pay him for his house in Bitcoin, and I strongly disagree. And the reason being is that most Bitcoiners that I know, which isn't wasn't necessarily everybody, but I know a handful, I know a bunch there. When they talk about spending their Bitcoin, again, they're never Gary too. They're never going to sell their Bitcoin. They have no interest in selling their Bitcoin for dirty fiat. That's stupid. But it is money. It is their savings, and they may spend it on things. And I commonly hear talk about experiences or things for the family. And the other one is leveling up that quality of life, to have that lifestyle change. And what is more kind of foundational to a lifestyle change than the house and location that you live in? So again, Joe's calling for, like, we're looking at like 135, maybe a little bit more at the end of the year for Bitcoin. We had JP Morgan going 165. I'm a little bit more bullish. I still think some euphoria is going to sneak in at some point in time. But as Bitcoin continues to rip, we know it's going higher. It's just a matter of time. It's not a matter of if, it's just a matter of when. You're going to have people out there that have a significant amount of wealth, and they may want to change their lifestyle. And I absolutely could see people paying for homes in Bitcoin so they don't have to bother going back to USD or CAD or Lira, whatever it is in the interim. Gary, your thoughts on this one?
Well, yeah, I mean, I saw the tweet too, and thank you for sharing it with me. And one of the big responses I saw on Twitter is people being like, "Yeah, okay, you'll pay for it in Bitcoin, but what about who wants to accept Bitcoin for their home?" Nathan, what say you?
Well, that's the place where, like, Open Door is just going to facilitate that transaction in the background. Again, you can think of Bitcoin for these guys, for these no coiners that still don't get it. You don't have to keep the Bitcoin. It's just a more efficient, a better wire transfer if you want to immediately convert it into fiat on the other side at your own peril. Because the idea of, again, selling a house and then converting into fiat, if you're going to sit on dollars instead of the house, or better yet, Bitcoin, you're just screwed. And so they're likely just sending it somewhere else as well too. It'd be a brief transaction to the next home buyer that they're buying from, unless you're dealing in sort of the investment space. But on the retail side, it's just people moving from house to house to house, and you need those people to facilitate it in the middle. I've done a few of these Bitcoin purchases and sales for Bitcoin purchase and sales of homes in Canada. And it is a bit of the pain in the ass, but it's not hard to do. It's nice to see more people moving into the space. I've had wonderful lawyers that I've worked with here in Canada, as well as the good team over at Bull Bitcoin has helped facilitate those trades. But the person on the other side, they just see a wire transfer show up in their account. They don't know where it's necessarily coming from. So good to see, again, just like Laszlo accepting Bitcoin for pizza was so important. In order for there to actually be store of value, it has to be a medium of exchange in the future. You're anticipating that. So the more optionality you have here, the better it ultimately is. Couple more quick ones I do want to hammer on here as well too. This is a little bit older, but again, still interesting. We had CEO of Uber confirming that they're looking at, ignore that, Bitcoin payments. Of course, they're going to take shitcoins as well too. Integration plans include considering Bitcoin payments for employees and customers through timeline remains unspecified. We would definitely accept cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, as a form of payment in the future, which makes sense too, right? Any of these online businesses, it is a instant, if you're using Lightning, it's instant, it's final settlement, it's cheaper than using credit cards, right? Uber doesn't actually have any cars. They are just an online service. Using the best in online payments makes perfect sense. Why not just pay for your ride with a Lightning transaction? That would be unbelievably easy. Plus, they're a global service as well, too. They don't have to worry about different currencies in different jurisdictions. Bitcoin's accepted everywhere. Additionally, similar with online businesses, we had Polymarket. This one blew me away. So Polymarket has decided to allow for Bitcoin deposits. I couldn't, pardon the language, I couldn't fucking believe it that Polymarket, again, gambling site, I guess it makes sense, gambling. They accepted a whole bunch of shit coins, but they didn't accept Bitcoin. That was the stupidest thing that I have seen, that you're going to accept cryptocurrency payments, but what, you're not going to take the king, the only one that's actually valid, the best store of value that there possibly could be? You could even they could even pose the question on Polymarket to see how people want to respond. Is Polymarket going to accept Bitcoin? They could have made a profit in laying that out as well too. So glad to see it's there. not encouraging gambling, but it is at least interesting to know where the market is actually, where the sentiment currently is in these things, but could not believe that Polymarket is just now accepting Bitcoin. And I still don't think this is accepting Lightning, which again, if you're taking small online payments, how are you sleeping on Lightning? But it still blows me away how often I talk to somebody who is maybe a new Bitcoiner or like a little bit tangential, maybe favorable, is aware of it, and they have no clue about Lightning. I still think that the Lightning adoption aspect is in the early phases. Gary, do you have any thoughts on gambling sites?
I would never personally endorse gambling. But that aside, I wonder, I guess, I don't even know if I care enough about Polymarket to wonder why they did it. I mean, I could sit here and bash them, but I assume they must have had some sort of actual profit motive business reason to not accept Bitcoin up to this point. I don't know what it is. If they gave me an interesting answer, I guess, but I just don't care enough about them.
I think it's probably even more likely something along the lines of like, that's boomer tech. They had bad advice, right? And they're like, we want to be the future. We're going to be the future, guys. We're going to be the future, which
could be. Yeah.
Just drives me crazy.
Yeah.
Speaking again of using Bitcoin to live, I have this post from HONEYBADGER. Company, I saw this one floating around the other day as well too. It is a service provider out of South Africa that is linking Bitcoin payments directly to retail, which again is fantastic to see. We got gentlemen here. I'll just go ahead and rewind this for a second. Whoop. Gentleman here that is
engine
paying for gas.
Pay with scan to pay and Bitcoin using the
Pockets fat, my wallet's full, numbers glow, LEDs scroll, talking crypto, talking code, don't need no fools, go, blockchain steady, never fold, diamonds in the note, fake side, pumping hype, I'm mining on the low, I don't want no shitcoin, I just want that Bitcoin.
Beautiful, which you love to see. Because again, the more options you have out there to use your Bitcoin for your everyday spendings, that means it's easier for you to demand it as payment. It means it allows you to be shorter fiat and save less in fiat. So any one of these, glad to see these guys. Wonderful to see that again, that Bitcoin payments adoption in South Africa. So worth checking out, something very cool over there. And I did find that I'm not 100% familiar with it, but it's Scan to Pay and HONEYBADGER that is powering it in the background. Now, I did want to say, because again, I have Bitcoin kicking around. What do I personally use? There are a lot of great options out there. In the States, you've got Fold. I think Strike has some integrations there as well, too. For me, I have been using the Dolphin card a ton. So if you can, AQUA's Dolphin card, super helpful, wonderful. I can't do in-store payments unless I enter it in manually, but it's still really powerful way to easily go from just Lightning into a prepaid Visa card and buy whatever the hell I might need. I don't have to sit in cash. I can stay basically completely in Bitcoin to the best of my ability. And similarly, AQUA is one of my big golden go-tos, and the other one is Bull Bitcoin. And Bull Bitcoin has got their Bull app now, I believe, on Android and iOS. This thing is fantastic. Another wonderful liquid Lightning wallet in the background that is also integrating. You can directly put your cold card on there as well. But the reason I want to mention the Bull app specifically here is because it's tied into the exchange. And so it was just last week that I paid a credit card bill through the Bull app powered by Bull Bitcoin that came from my cold card. Like, stupid easy. Absolutely wonderful. I love these guys. I love that we're building more rails to use Bitcoin as the actual, we say, transactional money side. And I think that really is important for adoption. Gary, I ranted a lot. Your thoughts, my friend?
No, it's obviously important for adoption. That's what, Ben, BTC Sessions has advocated for a long time. And I know you follow suit, having these circular economies where you're spending Bitcoin. Jack Dorsey has said it himself. If it never becomes like a means of transaction, it's eventually going to die. I think it's great. I legitimately think it's wonderful. On the flip side, I go back to something, Safe said in the Bitcoin Standard about how the evolution of money takes place. First, it has to be a store of value. And once you get to that sort of equilibrium point where people no longer think like, well, if I hold it for another day, it's going to like double again. Why should I spend it? Once it's widely adopted, then it sort of organically eventually becomes, this medium of exchange and unit of account. So I guess I have faith. I'm not really a faith person, but I have faith we'll get there eventually. If people want to help the process along by spending, and they're like, here, I'll pay you in Bitcoin, and then I'll just replenish some more on the back end. Great. I applaud you. I do that occasionally myself. So it's all good under the hood. Use your Dolphin card. I think it's a $4,000 a month limit on that.
Yep.
That's in American dollars, not maple syrup dollars, but
it's a lot for me.
That's a lot. So yeah, I applaud you. Go for it. If we can help the system move it along, that's going to help the value as well. By having the money go around, it will help the value of the money itself. So great.
Yeah, Bitcoin purchasing power is the reflection of the growth of the network. So Gary, stop being a pussy, get paid more in Bitcoin, demand it for your acting gigs, and start spending it and start getting it out there. This thing, I know we do talk about, it's not a faith-based position. Bitcoin adoption comes from us. It's up to everyone watching the show, hanging out at this channel, right? We all go through our evangelizing phase and we get kind of sick of it and burnt out at some point in time. I totally get that, but don't stop. You'll see new opportunities to even just ask. Even just asking the question could be the first of 5 touch points that turns someone into a Bitcoin maxi. So if you got a place, you got a favorite restaurant that you frequent, you got a butcher that you go to all the time, you got a barber that you absolutely love, ask him like, hey, any chance I could pay you in Bitcoin? He'll probably say no. Sometimes they're curious enough where they go like, I don't really need the money from this. Sure, let me check it out. Maybe I can learn a thing or two. But you're introducing the idea. You're signaling to the rest of the world that people have this and they want this and it's useful. So the only way we get to medium of exchange and unit account across the board is because a whole bunch of crazy fuckers like us went out there and tried. Start your local circular economy. Be better than Gary. Get out there and do more.
Be better than me. That's what I love about Nathan. Hype me up. I'm ready to go. Let's go charge through some fiat walls.
Let's absolutely do it. Awesome, guys. We're taking another quick break for show sponsors. Again, if you're liking the content, if you're finding it useful, please hit like, leave a comment down below. And if you're new here, subscribe to the channel. We have a ton of tutorial videos. Again, for the newcomers, go and check them out. We got the BTC Sessions Learn page. Amazing resource there. When we get back from the break, we're going to talk about some really cool, very important tech updates that you need to be aware of, as well as we're going to go a little bit. Of course, we're going to touch on the recurring segment of why Canada sucks and also why some other governments really suck these days. So stick around. We will be right back with you.
Bitcoin Well is the best place to be buying and selling Bitcoin in Canada and the US. And now with Bitcoin Well Infinite, it's also the best place to be making large buys at their OTC desk of over $50,000. Their white glove service gives you fast transactions, no slippage, and the lowest fees. You can scan the QR code on the screen or simply head to bitcoinwell.com/BTC Sessions to sign up today. And you can share your own personalized referral link to earn commissions.
If you've been around Bitcoin for more than a minute, you've definitely seen something made by Crypto Cloaks. Since 2017, they've been the go-to for badass 3D printed Bitcoin gear, from custom home mining rigs to sleek hardware wallet mounts that make your setup look pro. I've been stacking Cloaks gear for years, and most recently I grabbed their Gamma case for my miner. Let me tell you, it turns some heads. You can customize everything, and of course, the legendary Bitcoin grenade, yeah, that's them. Hit the link in the show notes or scan the QR code to visit CryptoCloaks.com and stack your own custom Cloaks gear today.
DEBIFI is the best and easiest way to borrow against your Bitcoin in a non-custodial way. Funds are held in a multisig escrow where you hold a key, and the platform allows for excellent hardware like the Cold Card Mark IV and the Q. You have access to flexible conditions, the best rates, and institutional grade liquidity. If you're looking to make use of your capital, don't sell your Bitcoin, borrow against it. You can head over to debify.com to check them out, or simply scan the QR code on the screen.
All right. We are back into it. So to kick off with a few things and some tech updates and some government shenanigans going on this week, I'm just going to start with, let me pull it up here.
Government shenanigans, you say?
Government shenanigans. What? We've got update from Wallet of Satoshi, and you may have seen earlier this week, I believe it was, Ben put out the tutorial on the new self-custody version of Wallet of Satoshi. I believe it is back in the US, and for those of you that checked out the tutorial early but couldn't figure out how to access it, I'm pretty sure it wasn't completely rolled out yet, because I was in the same boat. Ben being Ben, I think may have gotten a little bit of a sneak peek early and had access to the self-custody mode. That or just wasn't out to old users, or I have to do an update before we get it. But Wallet of Satoshi should be back in the US, and now we've got a self-custody version of it as well too, which is really nice because, again, this for me was a tool for, again, going back to onboarding people that are brand new to the space. Custodial wallet, absolutely, there's a trust trade-off there, but it was super fast, super reliable, and super easy for someone who was at zero, and I've got 2 minutes to send them some sats, right? It was a wonderful tool in that sort of sense. So if we can, there's a little bit of some nuance there. It's using state chains in the background, which again is pushing the boundaries of my understanding in terms of the layer 2 stuff, but still a wonderful option. great. It's going to give you a lightning address right away, which is super helpful as well. So you can reuse that. Like I've even got one for my Get Albi Hub. Good. Glad to see it. Worth playing around with. Definitely checking out. Great for onboarding. Gary, any thoughts on that quick?
I love that you're so humble about saying state chains is just beyond your expertise right now. You know so much. I heard the term state chains literally 37 seconds ago for the first time in my life. So you're doing great, Nate. Anybody needs to know anything about Bitcoin, contact Nathan. He will tell you everything.
If you can fully explain state chains to me in the comments down below, that would be hugely appreciated. And again, Ben did drop the tutorial on this one, so worth checking out. Another one to have in the arsenal. Another one for great for onboarding people. Additionally, my favorite desktop wallet, Sparrow version 2.3.0 was released, and they've added silent payments, which again, something that I guess I really haven't had necessarily a need for it, but it's great to see it there. For anyone who's not familiar with silent payments, you basically get one static address, and anyone can send to that, and you've got the privacy on the other side of it. It's not, they can't see your balance. They can't watch the activity from that. It gives you basically a single piece of information you can leave up there and then still retain your privacy like you were using a new address every single time. I had played around with it briefly on Cake Wallet, but really haven't used it much. So great to see it in Sparrow. I'm sure I will check it out and use it a lot more now that it's there. Because again, the cold card with Sparrow is probably my favorite setup. Speaking of which, segue. Cold Card, new firmware came out right now. Cold Card for the Q version 1.3.4. They've added basically 2FA and spending and policy controls on the Cold Card for the single sig. So they had the cosigner one with the 2 cold cards. Now you can have a single sig cold card that uses 2FA, and you can have spending and both limits and time policies directly on the device. So really cool. Excited to play around with this one. I'm sure Ben will throw out another tutorial on this shortly as he's constantly working on that ever-growing list. But Ed from Bitcoin Mentor, he jumped on this one right away, started playing around with it, said that it was fantastic, really liked it. Another great tool, another great feature to add to the arsenal. Now,
yeah, they just keep bringing stuff out. Ben said it the other day. You have this device, you paid a certain amount of money for it, and they just make it better and better without having to get new hardware. It's great.
That's one of the things that I really do appreciate about CoinKite is that I'm not having to buy a new wallet every year, every couple months to get a whole bunch of new features. They set themselves up with a platform, especially with the QR code and the QR scanner on the Cold Card Q, that they just keep adding more and more features, and it costs me nothing. I already like this device. I was already using it, and I get so many additional tools that end up being really, really, really helpful. The key teleport, the cosign. Now we got the single sig spending limits as well too. It's all wonderful stuff. So glad to see the team there is continuing to bust out new features for their users at no cost.
CoinKite, give us money now.
Please do. I think they give Ben some. So there's that.
But seriously though, I'm a user myself. It's actually legitimately a great product. I do like
100%. I've legitimately got 2 right beside me here. So there's your extra ad for CoinKite. Now, Canada. Canada sucks, and Canada continues to suck because it's following the path of Europe. What do we got here? First reading Canadian bill would strip internet access from specified persons. If having basically this tiny monopoly, or would you call it like oligopoly, there's like a couple companies in Canada that completely control all the cell infrastructure as well as the internet, you're kind of screwed. They run up the prices. The service is shit. We pay, I think, one of the highest for data in the world. If that wasn't bad enough, if them blocking out news, there's a whole news thing. I don't go on Facebook, but apparently can't see news channels on Facebook anymore. If it wasn't bad enough, they're now adding this. So Bill C8, which is now undergoing its second reading in the House of Commons, includes a provision under which Ottawa can pull internet services from any specified person. Gary, do you think there's any chance that critics of the government may at some point in time be considered a specified person?
I don't understand why you would say that, Nathan. That would never happen and has never happened, especially not in Canada. I think you're overreacting.
Canada most certainly is a socialist country. You can argue kind of where it is on the spectrum, but there's no history of like socialist regimes doing any sort of totalitarian controls over what you can or cannot say or how you can spend your money or where you can move.
Not that I know of. That's why I try to seek out socialist countries wherever I can. I hear it's a paradise.
It's just that, yes, it's an absolute, I can't even get through that one. Continuing on with the shenanigans and the terrible government news that we have. We did touch on it briefly, but of course, we're looking at more Fed cuts. They are going to continue to debase. We had Joe touch on this early, which is fantastic. And he was right. It was Maynard came out and said that we were looking at 0.5% as a neutral rate, which is absolutely ridiculous. And the other thing Gary and I were chatting about beforehand, which I find incredibly infuriating and kind of frustrating, whenever somebody comes out and tells me the neutral rate or like where it should be, or even they make a new adjustment. I don't fucking believe you. I don't believe you. And the reason being is this feels like ultimately just like throwing darts at a wall or just picking a number out of your ass, is that you never hear them come out and be like, yes, the neutral rate in the US currently for the month of October is sitting in and around 2.36% to somewhere like 2.42. Like there's no method, there's no formula, there's no kind of nuance or a little more accuracy. It's like, oh yeah, it's 2.0. Really? It's just exactly 2.0 or exactly 0.5?
It reminds you. Yeah, it reminds me of the South Park episode where like the people running the banks in the Federal Reserve like have this chicken and there's like a board on the floor and they cut off the chicken's head and it runs around crazy and wherever on the board it dies, like that's what they all decide to do. It's completely fucking arbitrary. When you made that point to me before the show, I was like, yeah, it's the same way with things like minimum wage. We need a $15 minimum wage. Well, why do you say that? Well, this is what the economists have said. Well, okay, which economists? Well, yeah, it's scientific. It seems really arbitrarily 5-0 to be scientific. How is it not like $14.83 or $15.21? It happened to be somehow magically exactly $15 an hour. Get out of here.
The science envy of the Keynesians is just absolutely ridiculous. Economics is not a science. It's just not. Value is subjective. You guys are going down the wrong path, and I won't speak for everybody else. I hate you for it. I absolutely hate you for it, and I hate it for these terrible policies.
I'm going to try to be the better man. I'm going to Ron Paul this thing. I don't hate people. I just hate ideas.
That's fair. Ron Paul's a better person than me, and that is without a doubt a fact. So fuck him. Now, moving on. Continuing in terrible government shenanigans. We talked about this last week in terms of chat control, which if you guys don't remember, you hadn't checked that episode out. And again, do make sure you subscribe. That way you don't miss future episodes. Chat control is basically an EU proposal that all communications, so basically, and I'm not sure how they propose honestly getting around encryption, but all communications have to be vetted by AI for the safety of the children before being sent, right? Or being monitored by AI. They're looking specifically for child abuse content is the excuse, right?
Always the excuse.
It's always the excuse around something along these lines. But every single message that you send, unless you're military or a politician or in policing, those people get privacy, but everybody else, you get zero privacy in your messages, which includes like Dropbox, social media, chats. I remember going through this. It was basically everything is going to be processed by AI, and then child abuse images will be reported directly to the authorities, which I've seen estimates as a 10% false positive rate, which means that if Gary goes on a nice romantic vacation to France and he sends this lovely lady a big picture of that big picture, that there's a 1 in 10 chance that the cops are picking him up for child abuse images. Like, it's absolutely ridiculous. So just hitting what Signal put here, we are alarmed by reports that Germany is on the verge of a catastrophic about-face reversing its long-standing and principled opposition to the EU's chat control proposal, which, if passed, could spell the end of the right to privacy in Europe, which it totally will. It's just getting absolutely ridiculous. And the worst part is, the thing that I hate most about where we currently are, and I believe this fourth turning setup, is this reminds me of like the Patriot Act. We saw that, I think it was Switzerland voted like 51% in favor of like screwing their own privacy. That there's a good chance that this gets passed and people just normalize it, like going through the TFSA and getting a prostate exam.
Yep. So I just want to be clear that in this scenario, Germany is the final defense against the all-reaching government panopticon. Germany. Okay, just checking.
I appreciate that highlight. And again, guys, there's tons of privacy tools available. I've been looking at using more on my own, like Start9 that I have set up at home here. Even if you don't use these things, and especially if you're in Canada, you got to be on this. In the US, you probably have more time. It's reasonable that like that's already been kind of what's called adjudicated. But either way, it does not hurt to be aware of them, even if you don't necessarily use them. So again, privacy on the attack. There was the interview with Lynn Alden and Ben yesterday too. That is her big concern in terms of what is a threat to Bitcoin. Is she ultimately is in the camp thinking that it is going to be the attacks on transactional privacy, which is why she's looking to invest and work in that space and build out those tools as fast as possible. Like Fedi, because I believe she's part of Ego Death Capital, if I'm not mistaken, but I could be getting things mixed up. But Fedi is inherent privacy as well too, right? You get that in Fedimint, which is wonderful. And it has Matrix powering the chat in the background and Nostr powering the ID. I think those are the tools that we really need at this point. The payment stuff is getting better. We're getting there. Lightning is fantastic. It's way better than it was even just like a couple of years ago. The privacy tools are what most people are sleeping on, and I hate for you not to have it when you need it. So do check that out. Continuing continuing. Germany continues to suck. Oh, let me just pull that one back up. We had friend of the show, Adam O'Brien from Bitcoin Well, posting, Germany has proposed raising the retirement age from 73. Let that sink in. 73. An entire generation told to work until their bodies give out just to keep a dying system alive. The whole forced retirement scheme thing, the pension plans, the government pension plans, it's a Ponzi. It's illiquid. There's no money there. It's insolvent, sorry, is the word that I was looking for. And now the only option they have is either reduce the payments, don't pay you, or just keep you working until you're basically about to collapse and die. I have many thoughts on this, Gary, but let me pass it to you. Why do you hate the German government today?
Well, it's just government. I mean, it's what we have here in the U.S., and I assume the system is similar in Canada. Here in the U.S., when they started Social Security back in 33, if I'm not mistaken, they started paying people out who didn't even pay in before. So the whole thing is predicated. It is a Ponzi scheme. Nobody likes to call it that, but that's what it is. They were giving out checks without actually having the money in. They're paying out recipients by people putting in the money right now. So when you think, I'll get my money back from retirement, you're not. That money's already gone. It was paid out to the next generation already, or the previous generation in terms of retirement. So it just goes back to the basic idea. If you're relying on government to handle this for you, it's probably not going to be there. I don't expect to receive, certainly not everything that I would have expected to receive in Social Security when I put my money in. And even if I got everything, I would have been better off if I could have kept the money and invested it on my own, even like a low risk mutual fund. I'd still be better off. I can't pass it down to my kids. If I die early, I never get it. So the whole thing, this idea that this wonderful progressive thing we're thinking of the people hurt most are the ones that die the earliest, who never actually get to see the money, usually the poorest among us. So it's a regressive scheme. It's garbage. It's not going to be there long term. I'm sorry if you hate me for saying it. Take your money out of the fiat system. Put it in Bitcoin. If you're sketchy with Bitcoin, even put it in gold. Do something. Don't rely on this. You're in for it if you are.
Yeah, even Pokemon cards did very well this year. There are a lot of better options than keeping it in fiat currency. And two, just to add to that point as well, too, it's a completely self-defeating cycle, right? So the only way that this stupid Ponzi scheme continues to go is if the population continues to grow. You need to have more workers paying into the system to pay off the people. Plus, they're living longer, which means you got to pay them out more.
Yep.
So in order for their stupid retirement Ponzi's to continue, you have to have the population grow. But if you're forcing grandparents to work until 73, that means they have no available time to support their children with the next generation as well, too. So how many people are having less kids because they have no support system? Their grandparents aren't available. They're working themselves to death. They're all exhausted. You got two parents out there, which means it's basically creating like an inverted pyramid that will shatter it even faster.
I never even thought of that. That's a great point, too. How much that plays into it, I don't know, but I think it's a legitimately good point.
We've seen birth rates across the Western world just absolutely tank. I'm pretty sure Canada's at like 0.1%. It's not even remotely close to replacement rate. And it has to do with the nihilism, how little time people have. There's also a very anti-natalist culture out there as well, too. All of this is a byproduct of the fiat system, and all of it gets undone by the faster you go out there and buy a coffee with Bitcoin, turn it into a medium exchange, turn it into the unit account, and make the Bitcoin standard actually happen. See that?
Word.
It's called a callback. Word. I learned that from Gary in comedy.
Nice. Well done.
Thank you, sir. Awesome. Beautiful. The last thing I did want to touch on here, for anyone in Canada or you want to come to Canada, we've got the Canadian Bitcoin Conference, October 16th to 18th. I am going to be there. Ed from Bitcoin Mentor is going to be there. Jesse from Bitcoin Mentor is going to be there. Emma from Bitcoin Mentor is going to be there. We've got a ton of other the bull Bitcoin. Let's just pull it up quick. Let's give them a plug because I'm going to hang out. I'm going to hang out in Montreal. I rarely get the ability to travel having 3 young kids. So if you can come and hang out with me, I think you kind of owe me. I feel like there's a sense of obligation here. So do come and check it out. Francis, we've got, again, Jesse. Tomer's going to be there, right? Adam, Brad Mills.
Ooh, look, there's a girl in the picture.
There's women as well, too. Tons of great people. Larry's coming up. Dave Bradley. Those are some of my favorites. You've got a ton of wonderful people there. Joey from the Canadian Bitcoiners podcast is going to be emceeing. Did I see Nico's going too? Sweet. I'm going to see Nico there as well. Look at that. Nico's hanging out as well. There is no excuse not to come and hang out at this thing. So if you can, if you're in the area, come to Montreal, come to the Canadian Bitcoiners conference. Gary, any final thoughts, my friend?
I just love spending time with you, baby. That's all.
Right back at you. Everybody, please do leave a like, leave a comment on this video. We're going to play a little bit of a clip here at the end because we want to encourage you to go and check out the Learn page. And with that, I am Nathan. This is Gary, and we will see you later.
Hey, you.
Yes, you watching the Bitcoin price movements and the latest exciting news. It's awesome to stay informed, but the real power of Bitcoin comes from taking control. Don't just watch, take action. Head over to btcsessions.ca/learn for free step-by-step tutorials that guide you through every major skill you need to know, plus full video playlists for deeper dives on any topic you like. And if you're ready for the ultimate fast track, scroll to the bottom and check out bitcoinmentor.io for premium one-on-one experience with my team of Bitcoin experts to ensure you get it right the first time. Don't wait. Secure your Bitcoin future today. Hit the link in the show notes or scan the QR code on the screen.